In the early hours of Friday morning, on the 13th of January 2017, Israeli jets bombed a military airport west of Damascus. The first report came from Zero Hedge. The opening paragraph reads, "Just as the Syrian proxy war showed some hopeful signs of finally dying down, the Syrian Army Command said on Friday that Israeli jets have bombed the Mazeza airport west of Damascus, accusing Tel Aviv of supporting terrorism and warned Tel Aviv of repercussions of what it called a flagrant attack." As Zero Hedge also points out, this is the second time in 2 months the Israeli Defense Forces have been accused by Syria of targeting Syrian positions from Israeli territory. On December the 7th, Sana reported that several surface-to-surface missiles were launched by the IDF from the Golan Heights. At the time, the source in the Syrian armed forces slammed the attack as a desperate attempt by Israel to endorse terrorists. History repeats over and over again with variations on the theme. In the 21st century, Tel Aviv has been supporting Islamic terrorists on the Golan Heights who have caused devastation in Syria in the last 5 years. A case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Resolution 242 sticks in their throats, and the thought of returning the Golan Heights to Syria is an excuse for another all-out war. The word Armageddon is mentioned once in the New Testament in Revelation 16:16. It comes from the Hebrew Armageddon. Har, meaning a mountain range or hills, or a fortress hill mount. Medigio, where crowds gather. The Golan Heights fits this description. Include in all these events the meeting on Sunday the 15th of January, when 70 countries gathered in Paris, France to sit on peace talks between Israel and Palestine. However, both Israel and Palestine did not attend the meeting. The meeting has an historical precedent based on ancient texts and artifacts, to the extent that Tel Aviv bases their illegal occupation of the West Bank and the Golan Heights on these documents. Perhaps now might be a good time to run through some of the biblical stories, as these biblical stories are exactly what Tel Aviv bases their land rights on. Israel consisted of 12 tribes, founded by Joshua. He was the grandson of Ephraim, who was blessed by Jacob as a firstborn and was therefore the designated leader of Israel. Israel, as Yeshua founded it, and according to Mosaic law, was a federated state where each tribe had their own autonomy, but were joined together by a common denominator, being the covenant. According to the covenant, there was no king but God, and obeying God meant obeying his laws. The tribes of Israel broke this covenant when they demanded to be ruled by a king. Any autocratic figure, whether he or she is a monarch, dictator, or high priest, who is regarded as above the law, infallible, and a law unto themselves, is considered to be idolatry. Jesus, Yeshua, in the New Testament, concurred. He said that he did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to complete, and that the law and God's will still stands. The 10 tribes of the northern Hebrew Ephraimite kingdom of Israel rebelled against the southern Jewish kingdom of Judea and did not want to be ruled by Judaic kings, but Ephraimite kings. In other words, the country was split into a 2-state solution, a proposal that is being put forward today. 2,700 years ago, both Isaiah and Jeremiah admonished the Jews in the kingdom of Judea for not supporting the Hebrews in the northern kingdom from attack by the Assyrians. If anything, when some of them fled south, the Judeans treated their Hebrew brothers like slaves. When the Assyrians attacked the northern kingdom, including Damascus, an Ephraimite capital, according to Isaiah, the kingdom of Judea did nothing to help to defend them. Again, a situation of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. As beauty is in the eye of the beholder, often the interpretation of a text is in the mind of the reader. Recent events in Syria have caused many scholars to revisit Isaiah chapter 17, which speaks of the total destruction of Damascus and associates it with Armageddon. In Isaiah 17, he describes a destruction that was brought against the Ephraimite city of Damascus, but at the end, he poses a very stern warning. All the nations who have attacked this city will be rebuked and reap a whirlwind. As a result of Judea being complicit with the Assyrians, in time to come, they in turn were attacked, rebuked, and reaped a whirlwind. They found themselves enslaved and sitting by the waters of Babylon. This is a similar situation to the one that we see in the 21st century, where Islamic State, most of whom are not Syrians and come from many different countries around the world, have attacked Damascus with the help of Tel Aviv on the Golan Heights and the recent bombing of the military airport west of Damascus on Friday the 13th. It was Isaiah who called Cyrus the Great the Messiah, and it was Persia, today Iran, that finally defeated the Babylonians in Iraq, freeing up the promised land for the right of return of the 10 Hebrew Ephraimite tribes to Israel, who had fled in a diaspora to Armenia, Greece, Egypt, and down into Ethiopia, and the Judeans, Jews and Levites who returned to Judea from Babylon. Today it is Iran who is fighting alongside Syria in the battle to defeat Islamic State, that rose like a Leviathan out of Mosul in 2014 in Iraq, once part of the Babylonian Empire. History repeats over and over and over again. 2,000 years ago, Judea persecuted the Samaritans, Torah Jews, Galileans, Essenes, and the early Christians in what once was the northern kingdom of Israel, forcing them to submit to the tyranny of the Levite moneylender temple priests and Arab, Edomite, Herodian kings. They had the backing and support of the Roman Empire and the Roman Emperor. Another case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. For most of the 1st century AD, Palestine was in political turmoil, with rebel factions, both peaceful and violent, protesting against a rogue state. The political leadership under the Herod kings regarded themselves as above the law. Torture, detention without trial, and crucifixion became the norm. Their Roman overlords and legions of armies taxed the country into poverty and cut down all rebellion, often slaughtering whole villages at a time. The temple priests, with their corrupt money-lending schemes and animal sacrifices, where blood ran through the streets of Jerusalem, denied the populace witnesses to speak on their behalf in any legal case, enforcing trial by ordeal. All three systems were corrupt to the core. The law and the prophets were disregarded, as they had been when Israel abandoned the covenant, a federated system of 12 tribes, each with their own autonomy, and instead were made subject to a corrupt, unipolar, centralized system with a usury monetary bank in the precincts of the temple. Yeshua turned down the devil's offer in the desert to rule all the kingdoms of the world. He said that he had not come to abandon the law and the prophets, but to complete. He overturned the tables of the moneylenders in the temple, and he was covertly arrested in the middle of the night, detained without a proper trial and witnesses to speak on his behalf. He was tortured, and his fate hung in the balance not with the law, but with a marauding crowd who chose a thief over and above an innocent man, which resulted in his crucifixion. By 69 AD, Judea reaped a whirlwind, were rebuked, and destroyed again. History repeats. The Palestinians on the West Bank, have been living under similar circumstances since the end of World War II, and Gaza has become the biggest open-air prison in the world, subjected to periodic bombing and genocide. Zionist bankers not only hold sway in Tel Aviv, but in all of the Western world, as does a centralized unipolar political system most evident in the EU Parliament, where politicians are appointed by the banks and corporations and are not representative of the people. Today we see the Jews, and I include in Jews Khazar Babylonian Talmudic Jewish converts from Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Georgia, having the privilege of the right of return. But the Palestinians, who are the descendants of the Hebrews, the Northern Kingdom, the Ephraimites, Samaritans, Torah Jews, later Christian and Muslim converts, over the period of the last 2,000 years, have been thrown off their land, and the Palestinians are not accorded the privilege of the right of return. Millions of them are classified as refugees and live in camps in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey. I have the same opinion as Jeremiah and Isaiah. Zionist Tel Aviv will reap a whirlwind. Torah Jews and Samaritans understand this concept, as did the Galileans, Essenes, and the early Christians. Babylonian Talmudic Jews and Khazarian Talmudic converts from Eastern Europe do not. Much like Judea, they persecute their prophets, as they persecuted Jeremiah, Isaiah, and later Yeshua, who they nailed to a cross. Many Christians wrongly believe that the Messiah will come when a temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem, a temple like the one 2,000 years ago, which was a pagan Babylonian money-lending slaughterhouse. Please read Revelation. When the new Jerusalem comes down, there is no temple inside the city, and there is no chosen race. All nations are welcome, as were all 12 tribes in Israel, as Yeshua, Jesus, the grandson of Ephraim, had founded it. There is another war brewing in Europe, World War III. Unless you have been completely asleep in the last 6 years, you are fully aware of the build-up in rhetoric and aggression by Western nations against Russia, now the protector of the Apostolic Orthodox Christian Church and the defender of Damascus. Again, this is history repeating itself. Napoleon failed to subjugate Russia, World War I failed to subjugate Russia, and World War II failed in spite of almost 30 million Russians dying in that war. Perhaps what we should be asking is, where did this insanity originate? Joseph Farrell posted the article, "Vatican calls for Central World Bank to be set up across the globe," and he made the following comments. Throughout history, one has seen an alliance between the debt money model, central banks, and religion. In short, an alliance between money chargers and the temple. And it seems to me I remember a certain someone having something to say about that a couple of millennia ago. Apparently, that someone and his supposedly infallible vicar are now in a bit of an ideological conflict. Boniface VIII stated clearly and unequivocally that it was necessary to salvation for every human creature to be subject to the Roman pontiff, not in communion with, not adherent to other Christian doctrine, but simply subject to the papacy. So now the Vatican calls for a global central bank and taxes on all financial transactions, and this is but another clue that the world of Boniface VIII is still alive and well. Its cut of the action, a seat, a central seat, at the table of Mr. Global. And we go back full circle. Today the world is still run by the high priest of the temple, the Roman Empire, and the Herodian kings. They are the Zionist bankers, the Roman pontiff, and the Saudi royals with their Islamic State mercenaries. They intend subjugating the world to a unipolar tyranny, where they are above the law.